Chapter 15 of The Web of Indian Life by Sister Nivedita, Margaret E. Noble. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 15. An Indian Pilgrimage. The old roads of Asia are the footways of the world's ideas. There is a camel track that crosses the desert from Egypt into Syria, broken at the Suez Canal by a ferry. What road in Europe, Roman or barbarian, can compare in charm and pathos with this sandy path? On it we might yet see a woman carrying a child on the back of an ass, and an old man leading them, even as the legends picture the flight of the Holy Family. But it long ago marched the armies of Egypt to meet those of Assyria in destructive conflict on the borders of Israel. By it, Judea sent the streams of her burning thought and fierce ethical emotion into Alexandria, before Christianity was born. Similarly, all over India, away from her ancient high roads, and thrown like a network across her proudest Himalayas, are little thread-like paths like this, ways made indeed by the feet of men, but worn far deeper by the weight of the impelling ideas than by the footprints of the toil-stained crowds. Such roads must once have connected China with Kashmir. Afghanistan, always a province of India, must by just such paths have sent its wandering merchants with nuts and raisins to the south, as long ago as the days of Solomon. Even now it is byways unpaved, deep-trodden, that the long-haired goats scramble down with their loads through the snowy defiles of Bokhara and Tibet, to be sheared in the sunny valley of Jhelum, and furnish wool for its famous shawls. Which comes first, we wonder, commerce or pilgrimage, the trade route or the palmer's path? Would it not appear that the utilities of exchange draw men from their homes to points organically related? And does it not seem reasonable to believe that associations of beauty, arising spontaneously at place after place on the line of march, give birth to the notion of religious privilege and obligation in making a return to particular spots? At any rate, it is certain that behind sanctity of pilgrimage lies admiration of place, of art, even of geographical significance. Benares in the north and Conjeeveram in the south are loved and visited in India for the same reason as Durham or Cologne amongst ourselves. They are cathedral cities, rich in architecture, in treasure, and in association of saints and scholars. Jagannath is placed where it is for sheer beauty of the sea, and perhaps a little also for the old cosmopolitan grandeur of the port through which flowed the eastern trade. Allahabad is sacred because there two mighty rivers join their waters, making her the strategic key to two vast basins, inhabited by different races with diverse traditions, hopes, and folklore. It is the solemn beauty of the Himalayas that makes them the refuge of holy men. The four most meritorious pilgrimages of the Hindus are the four extreme points of India, north, south, east, and west, knowing which the country must be known. The worship of the Ganges, and the reverence that makes a Deccan villager journey as an act of piety to look on the face of one who has seen any of the seven sacred rivers, amongst peoples less poetic, would be simply called the love of place. How large an element of Hinduism is the folklore of the country? To the student who is looking for this, it appears to be past all computing. The Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and the Puranas are, to a great extent, the outpouring of passionate fancy in local interpretation. In the story of Sati, the perfect wife, who can miss the significance of the 52 places in which fragments of the smitten body fall? And one finger fell in Calcutta, and that is still the Kali Ghat, and the tongue fell at Kangra, Jawalamuktu, in the North Punjab, and appears to this day as licking tongues of fire from underneath the ground, and the left hand fell at Benares, which is forever Annapurna, the giver of bread. No foreigner can understand the crowding of associations into these few sentences. Even the pole star has its Indian myth in the legend of the child Dhruva, whose heart was the steadiest point in all the universe. Nor is the historic element lacking in this unconscious worship of country. Like that of some Indian Bernadette is the story told at a beautiful southern temple of a cowherd who had one cow that gave no milk. He followed her into the jungle and found a natural lingam in the rock, over which she poured her offering freely, of her own devotion. And in proof of the occurrence, does the temple altar not consist today of that same lingam set in rough living rock? Of such stories the villages are full. Assuredly, a deep and conscious love of place pervades the whole of the Indian scheme. It has never been called patriotism, only because it has never been defined by boundaries of contrast. But the home, the village, the soil, and, in a larger sense, the rivers, the mountains, and the country as a whole, are the objects of an almost passionate adoration, and nowhere are we more impressed by the completeness of Eastern idealism than in this, its relating of itself to nature. Norway, with her broken crags and azure seas and somber pines, her glacier-crowned mountains, and her island-dotted fjords, is surely beautiful. But Norway's memories are always of the heroes, and we miss those voices of the saints that greet us at every turn in every part of India. Brittany, windy and gray, storm-tossed and boulder-strewn, is beautiful. Here, too, the miles are marked with rude calvaires, and the tales of the saints lie like her own moorland mists across the whole Breton land. But this Catholic sainthood never reaches the stern intellectual discipline of Hinduism, and we long in vain for that mingling of mystic passion and philosophic freedom, where holiness merges into scholarship, that at once distinguishes the Orient and weds its race and all their dreams to their soil. It might almost have been St. Francis, but it is actually a Bengali poem of the people that says, quote, "O, Mother Earth, Father Sky, Brother Wind, Friend Light, Sweetheart Water, here take my last salutation with folded hands, for today I am melting away into the Supreme, because my heart became pure, and all delusion vanished, through the power of your good company." End quote. Beauty of place translates itself to the Indian consciousness as God's cry to the soul. Had Niagara been situated on the Ganges, it is odd to think how different would have been its valuation by humanity. Instead of fashionable picnics and railway pleasure trips, the yearly or monthly incursion of worshipping crowds. Instead of hotels, temples. Instead of ostentatious excess, austerity. Instead of the desire to harness its mighty forces to the chariot of human utility, the unrestrainable longing to throw away the body, and realize at once the ecstatic madness of supreme union. Could contrast be greater? It's commonly said that Hindus derive the idea of pilgrimage from the Buddhist worship of relics, but the psychological aspects of the custom make this appear unlikely. Doubtless, the great commercial nexus of the Buddhist period made transport easy, and thus strengthened and stimulated the tendency, just as railways have in modern times opened up the country, and created the possibility of a geographical sense amongst classes who in older days could not have aspired to travel far or often. But in its essence, the institution is so entirely an expression of love for the motherland that it must have been anterior to Buddhism by at least as much as the Aryan occupation of India. If one visits the Canary Caves, hidden amongst the jungles in the north of Bombay, this fact is brought home to one. Here are 108 cells cut out of the solid rock. They are grouped in pairs. Each pair has its own water supply, and wherever the view is finest, wherever a glimpse can be caught of the meeting line of sea and forest, there a staircase and seat will be found specifically carved in the stone for purposes of contemplation. For nature is the eternal fact, and the landscape from this point 1,000 years ago was as beautiful as it is today. Ellora shows at a glance that through century after century it has been a holy place. The Buddhist found it already so, and in due time the Mussulman confirmed the ancient choice by bringing his illustrious dead to lie in the mighty Feen on its hilltop. But why was it first selected? None who has wakened to the dewy freshness of its morning, none who has glazed thence across the sea-like plain can ask. To all eternity, while the earth remains as she is, Ellora will be one of the spots where the mystery of God is born in overwhelming measure upon the souls of men, whatever their associations, whatever their creed. But we are dominated more by the idea that is behind us than by the spontaneous impressions of our senses. To the nomad of the desert, accustomed to the shifting of hot sands and ceaseless moving of the camps, with what coolness and refreshment must rise the thought of death. Mussulman piety has three motives: the glory of man, the charm of woman, and the holiness of the grave. In very early times we see the august pastor, Abraham, seeking out a cave in which to place the body of his wife. Death, the fixed, the still, the cold, must be shrined within the steady and imperishable. The long home, a great rock in the weary land, endless rest, eternal cold and silence, all these are to be found in the grave. Is it not easy to understand that while the peasant, from the banks of the Ganges and the banks of the Tiber, turns naturally to burning of the dead, the wilderness dwellers bury him deep in Mother Earth, or build him about with unyielding granite, and thenceforth make this dwelling house of the beloved as the center of their own wanderings. Hence, what the sacred place of pilgrimage is to the Hindu, that the Taj Mahal, or the tomb of Aurangzeb, or the ever-memorable grave at Mecca, is to the pious Mussulman. Almost every Mohammedan village in India, too, has its sleeping place of some peer or saint. And I have seen a poverty-stricken God's acre where the sole treasure of the people was a gnarled and scarly living stump that marked the last home of a long-remembered holy man. For it is the ideal of the desert, rest from their wanderings and shadow from their scorching sun. It is this ideal, and not the natural dictation of their own birthplace, that has become the guiding power behind the life and choice of these Mosmalized Indian folk. And yet all their old poetry of soil comes out in the spot they choose. The tomb in the village grove, the Taj at the riverbed, the iris-covered graves on the riversides and hillocks of Kashmir. What pictures do these make at dawn and sunset, or through the long Indian night, with its mysterious voices sighing and whispering about the dead? Surely by thus adding the pastoral tradition to her own, India grows rich, not poor, in the things that form the true wealth of men. A pilgrim's camp is like some scene taken out of the Middle Ages. Or rather, it would be like it, but it is so largely depleted of militant elements. The Nagas, or armed friars, are no menace to anything in the modern system, which indeed at this moment they do not understand. And the authority that actually protects and keeps order amongst the pilgrims is to be sought rather in the unarmed district officer or Tehsildar than in anything that could be recognized as forceful by the naked eye. In the South, which is the home of orthodoxy, pilgrimage has gone out of fashion since the advent of railways. Fewer people, certainly fewer widows, visit Benares, since it became easier to do so. And those who have seen a genuine crowd of shrine-farers in some place remote from steam cannot wonder at the shock which the pious imagination suffers at the sight of a locomotive. Amongst other things that the religious traveler has a right to expect is the opportunity of a flight from the new India to the old, as an actual environment. From any point where many ways meet, and various streams of pilgrims converge upon each other, the roads to the sacred place will be divided into regular stages of a day's journey, and at each halting place a camp will be pitched for the night. Even these rest camps will be situated as far as possible at spots peculiar for their beauty or interest. Is there a cluster of springs? The place is said to be holy, and we must halt there for worship. Originally, this referred only to beauty and convenience, but in process of time one cannot doubt that a certain atmosphere of insight and devotion has really thrown its halo about the dust and water of a locality. And in the place where so much simple faith has spent its rapture, the highest love and prayer have become easier to all comers. But the temples are all visited, the bathing is performed, evening worship is over, and silence and sleep fall upon the pilgrim's camp. The moon grows to the full, for we must arrive at the goal on the 15th day. And again, it is the simple beauty of the world which determines the law, that under the young moon shall be the going forth, and with her wane the return home. The moon is near the fullness, and weariness sleeps sound. At what hour is the first tent struck? When does the first sleeper rouse himself and take again to the road? Who can tell? Certainly not one who has never been able to rise so long before dawn that others were not up and afoot before her, and little heaps of white ashes from the cooking fires, the only sign of their 12 hours' tenancy of tree shadow or streamside. On go the pilgrims, singly or in groups, Old women, bent double with age, toil, hobbling along by the help of the pointed alpenstock. Monks of all descriptions are to be seen. Some of them are covered with ashes, have long reddish-looking hair, wear only the yellow loincloth, and carry curious tongs and begging bowls. These may be the yogis of the order that believes in the mortification of the flesh, or Nagas, the militant monks, who were once ready to defend the faith at any moment, and to this day are powerfully organized to meet the shock of a world that has long ago, alas, passed away like a dream. The sannyasin, often a man of modern education, decently clad in the sacred salmon yellow, accepting no alms save food, refusing to touch of any metal, is there, doing the distance cheerfully on foot. Next comes the ascetic, with withered arm held aloft and useless this many a long year. Again a proud mahant, abbot of some rich foundation, master of elephants and treasure uncounted, is borne past. Or as one climbs, having abandoned the open dandy that costs such intolerable labor to the bearers on the mountain march, one may be joined in kindly chat by some one or two of the naked swamis, men who wear neither ash nor clothing beyond the necessary scanty rag, who wander among sunny deserts and snowy mountains alike, indifferent to heat and cold, and of whom, when one talks with them, one remembers nothing, save that here are friends of the culture of scholars, and the breeding and rank of gentlemen. But the crowd is still more motley. In camp, the strips of yellow cloth that so often do duty as a shelter for the religious stand side by side with tents of all sizes and conditions. And here now are Zazana ladies, carried in scarlet-covered palkis, other women again on horseback, men and women alike on foot, or in open dandies, householders, widows, sannyatsinis in beads and yellow cloth. There are even some, too weak for walking or climbing, who are borne in straw chairs, strapped to the back of a man carrying a stout staff. On and on presses the irregular host, mixed up with Mohammedan baggage carriers and servants, cooks, and food vendors of all sorts. Here the road is broken by a glacier. There it becomes a mere goat path, running across dangerous crags. Here is the lake into which an avalanche, brought down by their hymn of triumph, once precipitated thousands of returning pilgrims. Now we have reached the heights where the ground is carpeted by edelweiss instead of grass. Again we are wandering amidst wildernesses of flowers, while every few yards the dominant note in the composition is changed imperceptibly. First the yellow wallflower, then flaming-colored Iceland poppies, again the long-stalked, single-headed Michaelmas daisies of the Himalayas. When the journey began, almost the only blossoms were the orchids on the tree trunks in the region of maidenhair fern. Now we have passed the last of the pine woods. Even the white birches, like smitten silver veining, blown sharp and twisted against the mountain sides, are gone. And tonight, when the tents are pitched over purple and white anemones, there will be no fuel save the juniper scrub that clings to the face of the rock in sheltered niches. On the edge of the last glacier, growing beside the gentian, we find an evergreen forget-me-not, unknown to us hitherto, and making the third or fourth new species, from a large crimson and purple myosotis onwards, which our pilgrimage has bestowed. Our neighbors in the tents about us are not amusing themselves by botanizing, probably, but they are communing with nature none the less, truly, than ourselves. On the last day, drawing near to the shrine, we shall see them risk their lives to gather the great nodding columbines and the little alpine roses growing on the rocks. Their talk is all of Siva. As they are borne along, they are striving, doubtless, to fix their minds on the repetition of his name, or the contemplation of his form. But the awesome grandeur and beauty of the heights about them will always be remembered by them as the great god's fit dwelling place. They are in a church. Rocks and glaciers form the sanctuary. Snowy passes are the pillared aisles. Behind them stand the pine forests, for processions of singers carrying banners, and overhead are the heavens themselves, for cathedral roof. It is the peculiarity of Eastern people to throw upon the whole of nature that feeling which we associate only with the place of worship. But is their love less real, or greater, for this fact? The day of the full moon comes, the last and most dangerous points are surmounted, and the shrine is reached. Happy the man or woman who, on this journey to God, is snatched out of life. One false step, and the soul that was struggling to see may be carried up at once in a swift, sure flight. Or death may come in other ways. It is so beautiful, I must be one with it, sighed a man who stood on a precipice looking down at the valleys. And before anyone could stop him, he was gone. Such things are not premeditated. There is a genuine ecstasy of the soul in which it hears the voice of the eternities calling to it, and the prisoning body becomes suddenly intolerable. Is it a stain upon Hinduism that it has never called this suicide while of unsound mind? But the shrine itself, where is it? What is it? Perhaps a temple placed above some gorge on a beetling rock with sister snows in sight? Perhaps the source of a sacred river? Perhaps a cave, in which continual dripping of water makes a stalagmite of ice, a huge crystalline lingam that never melts? One can picture how such a place would first be discovered. Some party of shepherds, losing themselves and their flocks amongst the ravines on a summer day, and entering the cavern by accident, to find there the presence of the Lord himself. Men and beasts, awed and worshipping, how dear is such a picture to the Christian heart. Worship, worship! The very air is rent with prayer and hymns. For the unreal to the real, from the many to the one, Lord of animals, refuge of weariness, Siva, Siva, the free, the free. Hours pass, and ere dawn next day the descent to the valleys is begun. Wonderful is the snowy stillness of the lofty pass when, with our faces set homewards, the moon fades behind us, and the sun rises before. The pilgrims march with less regularity now. All are anxious to return, and some push on, while others break off from the line of route. We reach our own village and say farewell to the acquaintances of the pilgrimage, adding what comfort we may to the provision for their further journeying. The nights grow dark now, and the great experience becomes a memory, marked always, however, in the Hindu's life, by some special abstinence, practiced henceforth as the pilgrim's thank-offering. It is easy to believe that the scenes in which we have mingled are nowadays denuded of half their rightful elements, that once upon a time as many of the travelers would have been Tartar or Chinese as Indian, that the shrine represents what may have been the summer meeting of great trading caravans, that Nagarjuna and Bodhidharma, going out to the further east with their treasures of Indian thought, were in the first place pilgrims on some such pilgrimage as this. Even now, many of the functions of a university are served by the great gathering. Hundreds or even thousands of religious men meet, in a manner to eliminate personal ties of friendship and affection, and emphasize and refresh the ideal and intellectual aspects of their lives. At the vast assemblies of sadhus, which occur once every 12 years at Hurdwar, at Nasik, and at Allahabad, there are fixed halls of learned disputation, where, for hundreds of years, has been discussed, determined, and expanded, something in the fashion of the Welsh Eisteddfod. Here come the wandering monks of every part of India. Here the householder finds himself in vigorous and renewed relation to his faith. Here fresh voices of learning and devotion are able to win for themselves ecclesiastical authority. Such opportunities must have been the means by which Sankaracharya asserted his undisputed mastery of the world of Hindu scholarship. Did it, we wonder, occur to Alexander that learned Greeks might be sent to such wandering colleges in order to hear and to tell new things? Sanskrit is the lingua franca of this ancient learning. To this day, the visitor to a Calcutta toll may hear the boys dispute with each other on old time-worn themes in classic tongues, and may picture himself back in the colleges of Thebes or Athens in the long ago. But here in the great Milas are the crowning achievements towards which are directed the harder ambitions of those Brahmin boys. And we need not wonder at their enthusiasm for such distinction. The great open competition, with its thousands of years of prestige and learning, is like all the learned societies of a European metropolis thrown into one. The canvas city of a few weeks at Nasik or Allahabad serves all the purposes of Burlington House to London. But the system of culture to which Nasik belongs is no longer growing, it will be said. This is indeed its defect. The statement is not entirely true, for even now the test of a supremely national personality would still be, for the Hindu world, his power to add to their philosophy. But it is true to the extent that there is nothing left for collective thought to discover. The common mind of India has now to sweep great circles of intellectual exploration in worlds that as yet are virgin as the polar ice, or India will die. Of this there can be no doubt. Far away from the noisy throng of learned saints, or taking a humble place in white cotton garb as visitors amongst them, are the men whose lives are passed in the libraries of kings. For the system of patronage is part and parcel of Indian scholarship, and as the Japanese daimyo or the Italian prince maintained his artists and artificers, so, under the old regime, did every Indian palace possess its staff of palace pundits, men whose lives were made free of anxiety in order that they might heap up knowledge and pore over ancient texts. The supreme privilege of the great is to foster piety and learning. But, on the other hand, Manu does not fail to point out that there is no crime for the Brahmin like the acceptance of gifts from one who is not the lawful king. And it is not royal persons alone who are charged with the duty of supporting scholars. Never a wedding or a requiem can take place amongst the higher ranks of society without the distribution of money to tolls and pundits. For this is one of the postulates of ethical and therefore of Eastern economics, that all great accumulation is for subsequent distribution. It is a strange world that has been revealed to us in this camp of pilgrimage, and it is not easy to reach its full significance. Scarcely in any two tents do they understand each other's language, and we shall do better to ask for bread in Sanskrit than in English. Malabaris and Bengalis, Sikhs and Madrasis, Marathas and even Mussulmans, dwell side by side for the nonce. Could incongruity and disunion be more strongly illustrated? Yet it was unity and not disunity that impressed us as we looked. From one end of the camp to the other, the same simple way of life, the same sacramental reverence for food and bathing, the same gentleness and courtesy, the same types of face and character, and above all, one great common scheme of thought and purpose. The talk may be in different languages, but no matter at what tent door we might become eavesdroppers, we should find its tone and subject much the same. Always the lives of the saints, always the glory of the soul, always fidelity to Guru and Dharma. By two formulae and two alone, renunciation and freedom from personality, is all life here interpreted. Other countries have produced art, chivalry, heroic poems, inventive systems. In none of these has India been altogether wanting, yet none is her distinguishing characteristic. What then has she given to the world that is beyond all competition? Today her gifts are decried by all men, for today the mighty mother is become widowed and abased. She who has opened port to all fugitives is unable now to give bread to her own children. She with whom Farsi, Jew, and Christian have been thankful to take refuge, is despised and ostracized by all three alike. She who has prized knowledge above all her treasures finds her learning now without value in the markets of the world. It is urged that the test of utility is the true standard for things transcendental, and that an emancipation into modern commerce and mechanics is a worthier goal for her son's striving than the old-time aim of knowledge for its own sake, an ideal for itself. And the modern world may be right. But even so, has India in the past given nothing, without which our whole present would be the poorer? Who that has caught even a whisper of what her name means can say so? Custom kept always as an open door, through which the saints may dance into our company, thought sustained at a level where religion and science are one, a maze of sublime apostrophes and world-piercing prayers, above all, the power to dream rare dreams of the Word becoming flesh and dwelling among men, that they may behold His glory. Are these things nothing? If, after all, the higher transformation of man be the ultimate end of human effort, which has more deeply vindicated its right to exist, the modern nexus of commerce and finance, or that old world on which we have gazed in the pilgrim's camp? End of chapter 15.